So let's talk a little bit about our planetary yarns. In fact, at this point, we have only got the planetary yarns, but I'm thinking that we'll probably, possibly by someone looking at this in the future, will have had a whole range of different yarns. So rather than me talk about this, it's probably better to talk to the man who invented them, Chris. So over to you. What should we talk about, and what do the people need to know about planetary yarns, or the magical yarns that you're creating is probably a better way of describing them.
Yeah, invented might be a strong word because I don't think I can take any credit for the art of spinning. But yeah, I suppose we haven't yet found anybody else that produces these, but maybe we'll start a rush of crafters wanting to craft. So essentially, I suppose we started thinking about this as a development project to try and figure out what and anticipate needs that people may not realise they have, and then kind of what skills that we could bring in. So as a spinner and a weaver, I thought it might be a great idea for us to have a range of yarns that were, say, imbued with power. So rather than you just buying things from Hobbycraft, you could have an actual spun yarn that's been hand spun with this particular range in the planetary days. So essentially yarns that could already add that extra bit. So in the way that if you've watched our videos and know anything about us, you obviously see the way that we work with charm bags, and gree-grees are kind of our go-to with beginners, and to kind of push people into that kind of more advanced category is getting them to think about the actual construction of, so not these bags made in China, organza bags with plastics and plastics and plastics, and actually where you could replace parts of that bag in order to do it. Obviously we don't sell those bags, and I hand make those too, so that the bags that you buy from Thoth are actually handmade too, but the cords that are in them aren't technically. We buy those in. It's about the only part of that bag that is bought in, so that potentially, if you wanted to, could be swapped out with one of these planetary yarns if you felt that was necessary. So
that's the thing. I mean, going back to what you see a lot of witches creating and what you see for sale in a lot of witchcraft shops, whether it's talismans or magical oils or anything like that, they're basically objects and things, component parts that are imbued with a type of energy. So a lot of people are used to luck oil or hot foot powder, which is basically energy, magic put into or an ingredient that you're going to use for your spell casting. The problem with, I think, a lot of modern craft is that there are a lot of people that might understand the principles of magic, but they're not great crafters in the sense of, actual craft. They don't know a craft. When you take textiles, or you take even fine art or something like that, and you've got someone that's really good at arts and crafts, or crafts in general, and then you've got someone that's really good with magic and magical craft, and then combining those together. Because I think back in the day, that was what you'd have. You'd have these experts, crafts people, that would imbue their energy into what they do. And nowadays, the only time you really tend to see that is with witchcraft products, which is your magical oils and your talismans and things like that. But I think what we're about is definitely pushing that back to where it used to be. I mean, you can talk a little bit about how long it actually takes to produce textiles work, given that you've done a lot of it. So, how long does it take for you to actually produce one of these yarns then?
So, well, yeah, I suppose there's a reason that we mechanise most things in order to reduce the amount of hours that are required. And in terms of history, the actual spinning wheel is quite a recent development, but it does speed up a hell of a lot. So some of our range, as it gets bigger, and like Liam said, if if you're looking at this from the future, then you'll probably see some other parts of it that are hand spun by spindle rather than spinning wheel. You can look at our videos for that, but you'll see. But with this particular one, obviously they're spun at a wheel, so it's probably arbitrary for me to say how long things take, on the fact that unless you know the level of skill that I'm at and where you're at, how long it would take would completely depend spinner to spinner. So let's just point out that in order to do a set of yarns of no specific length, I will devote a 2-hour period to spinning both parts of that yarn and then plying them together. So 2 individual threads that are spun individually that are then plied together, and that's what you have here. So they're only a 2-ply yarn, they're very finely spun. Unfortunately, I wanted to spin fine very quickly, and therefore I now struggle to go thicker. So if you actually wanted a bespoke yarn that was a lot thicker, I'd probably have to work really hard or send you to another spinner. But with these, so a bit more about how they are constructed. So the ones that are currently, as this goes out on the website, they are undyed ones. Now the main reason that's done is, any product that we produce is designed for you to then add your instinct to it. So these are undyed. They allow you to, if you wish, use them as they are, and do the additional work in how you're creating your spellcraft. Or you have the option to paint, to dye them in any way you choose. Some people talking about picking specific plants a day, or you might want to go for the colour. But essentially they are applied in they are set up in an intuitive way that allows you to adapt those colours. We may bring out a coloured range at some point, but obviously they will be my interpretation, or an interpretation I'm expecting somebody to want, rather than necessarily your own. But a little bit about why the choices I've made was obviously directed at using colour with them eventually. I prefer wool in its natural colour, so that's one of the main reasons that these are not merino or any kind of modern breed that you are used to seeing in the clothes that you wear currently. The breed I've specifically chosen is Blueface Leicester. It's a particular favourite of mine. One, because it comes in 3 main varieties of colour on every sheep, so I quite like the fact that depending on different variations you've got, so the 3 main ones that you'll get is kind of an oatmeal, a brown, and what we call an ecru, which is kind of a cream, because obviously white is not white. Unless you're looking at merino, then it probably is what you would consider white, but not in these kind of older breeds. And the other reason is Blueface Leicester is one of these epitomes of British sheep breeding. So it is really a prized position in terms of British natural, native breeds. Or at least I consider it to be. I would hope lots of people would agree. But we pretty much built an empire on producing wool, and we got very good at creating it. And as we are British witches, it makes sense that we would use British fibres. And these are the ones I chose. And then obviously the only variation to that, if you look at our multi-pack that shows the first grouping of the planetary ones, so planetary associations with the 7 classical planets and their appropriate days of the week as they were traditionally assigned. Sunday through to Friday is variations of the Blueface Leicester, and they're different variations in moles, so some of them are pure with one particular colour, some of them are blended. The more you know about planetary magic, you'll kind of make sense as to why those ones are, some of them are pure and some of them are mixed. We can go to that into a little bit if we've got time in a minute. The only exception to that is obviously Saturn, which is Saturday, which I obviously chose a dark. I think it's unmistakable to use anything other than a black wool. If you're going to choose wool for Saturn, you don't want to apply other colours. Yeah, you could try. Obviously, really, a black sheep is is really the darkest brown you can possibly find, rather than an actual black. The real exception to that is Black Welsh Mountain. She's a hardier breed from Wales, obviously, that lives up in the hills and therefore has a really beautiful dark coloured coat. And I think, having worked with it, it's one of my favourite to work. And as Saturn is kind of one of my favourites in planetaries to work, it made sense for me to combine the two. Whereas I could have quite easily, and there will be other yarns in the collections as they come out in the future, that probably include a white yarn somewhere along the lines, because it's in its natural state it is white. But I think for this particular range it kind of had to be the Black Welsh Mountain in order to give you that really beautiful black that comes with it. I've rambled on, so Liam should probably tell me what I have or haven't missed, or what he wants to know. Say,
I mean, they look absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to start working with them. And I'm sure there are some, based on what the type of medium that you're working with, in the fact that they are yarn, the fact that, you know, people can buy them in small lengths to use in spell kits and spell crafting and stuff like that. But then also, because you have the full lots of different energies there, if you are going to incorporate them into a garment or a larger piece of textile work as the kind of magical core in that work, that's one of those things. I mean, it's not just like, I mean, you are essentially a master at textiles, or I would say you're a master at textiles. And textiles is one of those things that the oldest, one of the oldest associations to a lot of goddesses, you know, the powerful ones from the beginnings of empires and stuff, are often associated with textiles work, weaving and stuff like that. And if you think about the amount of effort and work and time, not using a modern machine, if you're doing things by hand, that it takes to actually put this together. Think about creating something like, I mean, you can talk a little bit about your weaving and stuff like that in a minute, but think about someone muttering incantations over a candle, and then compare the amount of time and energy you're putting into that compared to weaving something. Or lace. I mean, you know, how long does it take to make a piece about lace, you know?
Yeah.
If you're concentrating and imbuing your energy into that work, that's, you know, I mean, what at the Lace Museum, but we've seen lace that's what takes thousands of hours, would you say?
Yeah. So I try not to go too far off topic, but essentially, because it's too easy to do, you know, when we're talking about textiles, because like you say, it's one of those, it's art and craft that you live your life in. It's not a pretty picture that is painted on the wall, but it can be. It's one of those, it's so versatile and has had to be, that it has those options. Yeah, and the hours and hours to not only spin what's required to produce lace or weaving or anything like that, but also the time and energy that goes into actually making. It is almost impossible for that work to not absorb some of all that energy that you are putting into it. What's slightly different, which is probably whether or not you meant me to go this way, but that kind of links nicely to how these are produced. So I spin these, they are, like I said before, there are two separate threads that are then plied together, but those two threads, and it is all mentioned on the cards that come with it and on the website itself. So I chose to spin them what's known as a kind of S-spun way, which basically means anti-clockwise. Now, most people probably think that is odd to do so that way, right, when you're trying to create something, that you would go in what most people would consider the wrong direction. My thought process for that is that when I am creating this piece, I want it to absorb the energy of the day rather than my energy. And I think I wouldn't want to colour your yarns. For the work that you're about to do, it needs to be as what's the word I want?
It's a pure
as unbiased as possible. Yeah. And so it's not leaning in my direction or my understanding of any of those energies. So by spinning them spinning them individually anti-clockwise, it was allowing the spinning wheel, and it did get a bit rocky at one point, to observe that day and that time and absorb that energy into it as they were being made, and then they're applied together in which traditionally you go in the opposite direction to balance a thread out, and therefore the two were then spun clockwise, Z applied, in order to put those two together. Now at that point I do want them to interact with each other, so spinning them in a clockwise direction when they're being combined, and then allowed them to balance themselves out, again avoiding me in the process as much as possible. So I hope that kind of made some kind of sense.
Well, I mean, from the video that you're probably watching now, you can really see that is happening. You can see how those two cores are essentially coming together, you know, as they're going through. I mean, I know nothing about textiles, but I just think of it in terms of physically, even if you look at it, you can see how these things are moving and twining together and incorporating together whilst they go through that little hole wherever they disappear to on the bobbin. But yeah, I mean, what about in terms of their use then? Because of course, like you said, these are core energies essentially, or quite close to being super core energies. So comparing these sorts of products that really someone that really understands magic would be more interested in using. You know, the difference between the practitioners that we see is the beginners and things like that, they want an oil which it says what you're supposed to use it for. Whereas a lot of, you know, the hardcore practitioners, they just want the raw energy. They know what they want to use it for. They want to just incorporate that. So in terms of, obviously at the moment we have the planetary series and we may be coming out with moon phases and those sorts of energies. What would you say in terms of what applications people might use these for?
So I suppose for me, the original idea for me was it came out of the fact that we really wanted to put a knot kit together, a knot magic kit together, and that seems the most obvious application of something like this. And the fact was trying to find threads and yarns that were appropriate, that were, for lack of a better phrase, witchy enough to actually put into a kit like that. It seemed that the only option was to basically make some yarns myself in order to include in some kind of kit like that. So watch out for those. Anyway, when it comes to application, it's a case of, you know, it can be as simple as a little knot spell where you're trying to capture additional energies into knots, or I won't go too much into how knot magic works, but or at least various varieties of it. We'll have to put another video on at some other point. But essentially, those are the sorts of this. So anywhere that you could use textile, you could essentially add these in order to imbue that additional power. So you don't necessarily need to have done an entire gorgeous tapestry and bought hundreds and hundreds of thousands of meters of our products in order to do it. What we're essentially saying is adding, say, a small square to a patchwork blanket, or sewing in a piece, sigils on the inside of clothing garments, or anything like that that could apply that magical power or energy force that you want into the work that you're doing. Or as simple as, like we said before, replacing the cord in a charm bag or a gree-gree, that just allows you to tie that extra energy in there that you may want to add to your working. Obviously you can always speak to us if you have some ideas and you want to know the best way in order to try and do that, and we can try and help you in that way. But essentially, anywhere you think you can apply it, there'll be some kind of way. Why not add it into your, you're knitting a jumper or crocheting something, and you just want to add a line around the edge, or one of your raglan edges you're joining up, and you want to just add that extra bit of protection or attraction, or any of those things that you could assign to those planetary areas that you might want to then add in. Again, you don't need to be going down a kind of full hardcore ceremonial way of then wanting to find the perfect plant to dye them with, and on the particular hours of particular days. But if that's what you want to do, this is a really great core product for you to start with, and you've already got a leg up in the direction that you were hoping to go in.
Yeah, I think, again, the more you understand about planetary magic and the correspondences with them, and even, in fact, the deities that are associated with them, you can take it out of the realm of textiles. You can literally think about, okay, I have some lunar spun, so I could create a pendulum out of that. I can attach something, a crystal, and not only do you have the crystal that would be imbued with, something magical, essentially, but you've also got the cord that you're holding, the cord that you're using. So whether you decide to take a lunar yarn and use that for your cord that that your pendulum's hanging on when you're doing pendulum readings, or perhaps, given that it's communication, Mercury, all of these have associations. And again, if you're using magic such as, we both like Saturn, that's what we think is probably going to be a big seller. But think of binding, for people that do binding spells with voodoo dolls or puppets. The fact that you're binding them with Saturnine cord that's spun on, and incorporates Saturn, that which constricts, is one of those things. Or if you're doing something of a not particularly nice nature, Mars, the warrior, that sort of energy to incorporate into your spell work. There's potent energy there. And again, what you don't see is you don't see these. I've not managed to find anywhere that actually sells planetary yarns or anything like that. It's in ancient, technically textiles is an ancient practice, and the ancients would have understood this, but in most witchcraft shops and metaphysical companies and stuff, they're not selling this sort of thing. Normally a witch would have to make all of this themselves, and are you going to go out and buy a spinning wheel to do this? Well, you don't have to. Now you can buy them from us.
So yeah, I don't know what else more you can kind of say. It's one of those things that you just need to try and find out if it works for you, if it doesn't quite, what you need to twist and turn in order to make that happen. Obviously at Thoth, the whole idea for us is that it is a craft, so why not add another craft to it in order to learn more, explore more, push the boundaries as much as you possibly can. Hopefully this and the other ranges that we bring out in the future, not just textiles related ones, will allow you to actually push as many boundaries as possible.
So there you go. You've got our magical yarns. We're ever increasing the energies and the yarns into that. Of course, at the moment, there's only so many hours in the day, and there's a lot of effort and time that goes into producing these. So you will see this as a product develop. Other energies and incorporations. We've even talked about plant fibers and things like that being incorporated in the future. So definitely watch this space, because I'm sure it will evolve. But just talking about it now, I want to get the multi-pack and have a little play. But there we go. Thanks for watching.